Hello YouTube, this is Engineering Beardsman coming to you with another Genshin Impact video. This time around we're going to start a new series where we cover basic game mechanics. In particular, we're going to start off with elemental particles. These are the type of things I want to cover to make sure both veterans and new players understand how the basic game mechanics work, and if you're all at all interested, please do stick around. Yeah, let's get started. All right, everybody, so first things first, let's talk about what an elemental particle actually is. Elemental particles are symbols that appear over mobs' heads and or right above your health bar on the bottom of the screen. So right now at the bottom of the screen you don't see anything but my health bar. If I were to eat some food, for example, you would see that come up if I get a buff. I'll do a resistance potion. We'll do electro resistance. If I use this and I go back, you'll see that now there's a little bottle icon, right? That is where elemental particles will appear on your character. So if we walk into the water, you now see a hydro symbol, right? That means I am now impacted by hydro. That is a brief introduction to what elemental particles look like on your character. Let's move on to checking it out on mobs. So I'm going to hit it with pyro. You see that pyro is now applied onto this mob. How you can see that is right above the mob's head is the pyro elemental particle. That symbol right there is the pyro symbol. This is how you know that you've successfully applied a particle onto the mob. Okay, so as you can see, these mobs are getting pyro applied to them by the mechanism in the middle of the domain, right? And this is important because as you progress through the game, you'll do more things like this where you're interacting with domains that apply either particles to you or mobs. How this impacts you is going to depend on the application. One, whether it's applying to you or the mob. If it applies to mob, you can take advantage of it by executing a elemental reaction without the need of you to switch between two characters. For example, in this pyro dungeon, you can apply hydro, which will then have the elemental reaction of vaporize. And we'll dive in a little bit more into elemental particles as it relates to elemental reactions a little bit later. Right now, let's focus on how the domains can apply particles. I did mention these domains will potentially apply particles to you or the mob. And if you're going to do Spiral Abyss, which is endgame content, that's something that you'll want to keep track of because it'll impact how you decide how to build your team compositions for that endgame content, aka Spiral Abyss. So do keep that in mind as we move on to elemental reactions, and we'll have another video that goes more into Spiral Abyss in the future, but for now let's focus on elemental particles and moving on to how elemental reactions work with elemental particles. Okay, so when it comes to elemental particles, the way they work when it comes to elemental reactions is when two particles collide, meaning a elemental reaction has now occurred, what actually happens is both those particles disappear. Okay, there are exceptions to this rule, one of them being elementals like the elemental cubes that you see in the world. And take a look at this elemental cube right here, the electro one. As you can see, once I apply any other element outside of electro to it, what ends up happening is an elemental reaction will occur that is in relation to electro. However, if you take a closer look, it still has electro applied to it. And since this is a boss, you'll see that right where its health bar is, right below it, is the elemental particles that are being applied to it. So the electro one does not go away, and the ones that I do apply on top of electro cause a reaction, and those go away right after the reaction occurs. Now moving on to cryo registine, which is not an elemental in and of itself, but it has a resonance much like slimes do to cryo. So as you can see, I can remove cryo from it. Once I do remove cryo from it, I can apply other elements that will cause other reactions, much like I can do to slime. So once you remove their base particle, you are then able to move on to apply two other particles that have nothing to do with their base particle, the particle that they can reapply to themselves. With that being said, this is something that you're going to have to do to a lot of mobs out in the wild that aren't neutral mobs. Basically mobs that don't already have particles pre-associated with them, like slimes or regisvines. So hilly trolls, for example, they are a neutral mob that doesn't have any particles pre-applied, and they don't have a base particle that they walk around with. So this is something to keep in mind as you're fighting against world bosses, that there are mobs out there that already have particles associated, which will impact how you end up interacting with a mob and maybe change the way you have set up your team composition. For example, against the cryo registine, it is good to have a pyro character in order to remove its initial shield buff, which is that little eyeball there that you see me breaking. And the reason why you want to do that is because it will speed up your ability to do your normal damage that you would to a mob, because shields are things that debuff your damage towards the mob itself. And we'll get into shields some other time because that is not a basic mechanic we're currently covering right now. That wraps up what we're talking about today. For elemental particles, this is a high overview of the basic mechanics, elemental particles within the game Genshin Impact. If you have any further questions, or if you think I missed anything specific to elemental particles, please do let me know. The other things that we've discussed here, like elemental reactions, shields, and so forth, we will dive into deeper at a later time as another section, part of the series where we cover the basics of Genshin Impact mechanics. So if you would like more content like this, please do hit the like button, subscribe, and feel free to follow me on this the socials listed below. If you want updates or you want to interact and you have other questions that you want me to respond to in a more timely manner. And if you ever want to ask us live, we stream daily on Twitch. Currently no schedule, but I mean, I always send out notifications, and generally we stream roughly 8 hours a day. But yeah, come join us in chat. Check out the links below. Thanks. Bye. Yes! 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 Oh, fuck no!
Nighttime.
Ah!